Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing incredible. Welcome to another episode of the Dentalflix Uncut podcast. I'm your co-host, Dr. Anissa Holmes, and today I'm here with Anthony, and we're here to talk all about cybersecurity, all the things that you really need to know that you may not know. He is the founder of Techspedient, and I know that I have really been doing a lot of research over the last couple of years. And he is somebody that everybody needs to have working with them inside of their practice. And so, Anthony, welcome to the podcast. Super excited to have you.
Thank you, doctor. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. So, I would love for you to share, and let's just get right into it, right? A little bit about like who you are, what you do, and how do you serve dental practices in our industry?
Sure. As you said, I'm Anthony Jurjevic. I've been in IT for the better part of, 25, 30 years. Got a bachelor's degree in information technology, worked for large consulting firms, got my vendor certifications, Microsoft over the years, CISSP, which is the security gold standard certification. We used to do a lot of penetration testing versus for Fortune 100 companies trying to penetrate their systems. They would pay the consulting firms we worked for and try to breach their networks and show them the vulnerabilities that were on their network so they can better secure their systems. So that's kind of how I got into cybersecurity, and then started my own company to help dental practices. My wife's a dentist, so I saw the need and decided to start my company and help dental practices with that.
So sometimes people hear this topic and they're like, I'm good, right? Like, I'm good. I have to think about something else. I have to think about team and staff and like other things that they feel are really important at the time. Um, I would love for you to kind of, as I talk about, and I definitely know your wife, beautiful lady, right? As I talk about, and she hears me talk about rearrange the furniture in your head, right? Can you just kind of maybe rearrange the furniture in people's head and help them understand why they need to really understand the importance of this right now?
Sure. Cyber criminals are attacking, businesses every day. There's something like, I forget, it's like 20,000 ransomware attacks a day happening in the country, right? So you don't hear about it on the news because a lot of them are small businesses. You only hear about the larger breaches, the major breaches that involve hundreds of thousands or millions of users. The small dental practice is not going to really make the news, but it's going to disrupt that practice if something should happen, like a breach, ransomware, data being leaked of their patients on the dark web. I've seen that a lot when I go into the dark web and do research, where you can pull, patient information like driver's licenses. It's really eye-opening when you go into the dark web and see that data there being sold or being just freely given out. So it's important to make sure that you're protected and not just, trusting your IT provider, but understanding that you should have like an assessment done to make sure that you're being protected properly.
So, what does that mean? An assessment? Like, what does that mean? People might be like, okay, that sounds good, but I don't understand what you're talking about, right?
So basically having either a third party come in and do like a penetration test, we offer a phishing simulation. So we basically will send the practice owner or the office manager a link via an email. They'll click on the link. It'll run a scan to see what it could have gotten away with if it was a malicious link. And then we generate a report from that. And then we kind of review the report with the practice and say, okay, these are where your vulnerabilities are. This is where maybe your current IT provider is deficient or isn't quite, strong, and they're not really taking care of you on this end. And then here's maybe some of your strong points that, you are secure. So we kind of, it gives the practice a good baseline of where they are from a security perspective.
So, what is that? I'm just very curious. Like having stories, I know that I certainly have had a couple of coaching clients that had a ransomware attack. They couldn't work for multiple weeks, right? And so I'd love for you to maybe share some stories because again, some people might be like, oh, that's never going to happen to me. I mean, what is our moral obligation or obligation as a practice owner to our patients, right? Like, so is there some standard that we have to be held to? Like, does that exist? You know, what are the stories that are out there that are actually happening?
Sure. So there's HIPAA compliance, right? You have to be HIPAA compliant. There's a privacy rule or component of HIPAA, which basically you shouldn't allow anyone unauthorized access to your patient data. If a ransomware happens or if a breach happens, typically the cyber criminals extract your data today before they ransom the practice. And that way they can kind of, it's called double extortion. They'll say, okay, pay the ransom to unlock your stuff, but then they'll come back and say, by the way, we have your data. If you'd like us to not publish your data or sell it, you need to pay us an additional fee. That's typically how that happens. I know of several practices that we've come in on after the fact where they were hit with ransomware. One practice in Maryland, they ended up paying over 100,000. They had insurance, but the cost came to over 100,000 to remediate everything. That wasn't even including us coming in, and that's just like paying the ransom, you know, and getting that end of it straightened out. Not to mention like kind of redoing the network and getting things squared away there. So it can be a very costly endeavor. And then if you really should do forensics during a breach to make sure that the data wasn't stolen, because if it was stolen, you need to report. If you don't report, problem is that data is going to be on the dark web. The federal government, you know, CIA, law enforcement's always monitoring the dark web, and eventually that's going to come back to haunt you if you don't report. And that data is there because it's going to be traced right back to the practice. So it's important to do it correctly.
So how often is this happening?
It's happening quite a lot. You'd be surprised. There are even clients that we've onboarded where you know we didn't know that they were breached at the time. You know that in the past, and the doctor would tell me like a year later and say, yeah, you know, 5 years ago we were hit with ransomware, and they just kind of recovered from backup and moved on. But to me, it's like, well, that was a big risk because you didn't run forensics to see if the data was stolen, and that could eventually come back to haunt that practice. But it happens all the time. I mean, like I said, there's about 20,000 ransomware attacks happening every single day in the country. So it's just a constant, and you just don't hear about it.
So if I'm a practice owner, what can I do to just make sure that I'm good so I can just take this off my head and I don't have to worry about it? Like,
So,
what can I do?
so a lot of IT providers they'll put a firewall in place, they'll put antivirus in place. That's all good as long as it's configured properly. Configuration is important. I've seen a lot of firewalls that aren't configured properly. I've seen antivirus that really isn't configured properly, or it's not the right antivirus that you should be using. We like to take a more layered approach to it. So we do have firewall, antivirus, but we also add a couple of other items to that list. Like we fine tune like policies, we fine tune alerting. We also do application whitelisting, which basically is kind of like an anti-ransomware service. What that does is it allows all the applications that a practice uses every day to run normally. However, anything that's different or that's a new application is going to get blocked. And basically, then they can request access. We will look at it and say, okay, this is a valid application. We make all the practice and say, hey, are you really trying to install this? And we'll confirm that. We'll create a policy for that application so that it can then be installed and used moving forward. So there's a lot of different tweaks that need to be done for one, performance optimization as well as security that we kind of implement.
So this is very interesting, and you know it's it's also something that having an IT provider, it's somebody that you want to make sure that you have peace of mind with, right? Again, many people know that I speak to a lot of different companies, and very few I actually bring on my podcast. Very few I bring in front of the people that we help, because who we choose for our business is really important, right? And
Right.
why I love what you're doing is, number one, like the heart-centered core value and why you're doing this. Your wife is a dentist, and so it was like out of love for her and making sure she was okay with what you were doing already. And it was like, wow, there's a lot of other people that need this, right? But it's been beautiful to see how many others, as I'm in Facebook groups, right? As I'm looking at clients of yours talking about, oh my gosh, this happened. Anthony got on a plane this morning and flew across the country to make sure that I was good, right? Like that's, people vouching for you is powerful. Bob D, many people know him and his Facebook group, vouching for you and how you take care of people and how you know what you're doing and how you can get in there and pretty much breach anyone, and because they're breachable, says a lot for what you're doing. So I just want to say, just as you guys are listening, number one, I highly recommend at least having Anthony to look at your network and see where you are, right? And then deciding, if this makes sense to move forward with him or not. But again, everybody that I've spoken to has said nothing but like the way that they can trust what you're doing and that their network is safe. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, we do our best to secure the network. We're very focused, but it's a delicate balance between like being able to like make sure that they're running optimally and also they're secure at the same time. You have to have that delicate balance, and we try to balance that as best we can. And on another note, with regard, and I know being that you're more marketing and you're probably going to be like dissuading this, but the reason we don't really publish a lot of like the practice names on the, like, let's say I'm onboarding a practice, I usually don't display who the practice is. We also don't give we don't publish our help desk number. It's a totally separate number from our main number. The reason we do that is because hackers can social engineer that information. So let's say I published, practice A's information and said, hey, we just onboarded this practice, we're happy to have them as a client. Um, a hacker that goes and looks at Facebook or whatever and sees that, they can easily spoof our phone number and then basically call that practice and say, hey, we're with Techspedient Networks. We need to remote into your system. Unfortunately, I don't have our normal way of remoting in. Can you allow us in? A practice would be, thinking that they're us and they would let them in. And so we kind of take those extra steps. Unfortunately, we can't, put our practice names that our clients, practice names out there because we want to, make sure that they're secure in that regard.
So if somebody's listening right now and they're like, okay, I'm kind of interested. She's got my attention. He's got my attention. What's the next steps? What do they need to do next?
Sure, they could give me a call, shoot me an email. We could schedule a discovery call, set up that phishing simulation to see where they're really at as far as security and where they're vulnerable, where they're not. They get the reports for free, whether they move forward with us or not. They get to keep those reports, so they could, give those reports to their current IT and see if they can fix it, or they can move forward with us. We're not. I don't push sales. I'm more about caring for the practice than I am trying to sell them something.
Yeah.
So
So what's the next step? Where would they get that all set up?
sure. They could email me directly, ajurjevic at techspedient.com. I could put that in the chat if you'd like, or they could call our number 732-839-1643 and schedule a call.
Awesome. Anthony, thank you so much for coming on and shedding a little light into something that's really important for everyone's
Thank you.
practices. I really appreciate you so much, and I appreciate our conversation and our chat.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Doctor.
All right, guys. So that was another episode of the Dentalflix Uncut podcast, and we'll see you next time. You've just unlocked valuable insights with Dentalflix Uncut, but there's more. Dentalflix is not just a podcast. It's a thriving community, a hub of knowledge, and the #1 online streaming CE platform in dentistry. With just a few clicks, you can start exploring a wealth of resources, including in-depth training on leadership, case acceptance, scheduling, hiring, weekly marketing calls, insightful gap assessments, and scorecards, all designed to help you master what you discovered today and propel you further on your path to dental excellence. Head to dentalflix.com to get started for free and embark on your journey towards mastery. Thanks for tuning in to Dentalflix Uncut. See you next time.